I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council Members Burgoyne, Gearbaugh, Peters, Rhodes, Roth, and Tahar. From City staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, City Treasurer Bennett, City Superintendent Engineer Rubel, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, and our DPW Director, Mr. Fordyce. For the rest of you who are in the audience this evening, we encourage you to sign in the back on the table to my left. And at this time, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Mr. Burgoyne wanted to add an issue regarding, remind me, Mr. Burgoyne, is it a wastewater treatment plant?
Sewer reserve.
Sewer reserve, excuse me. Thank you. Sewer reserve. Also in front of you this evening is a copy that was just distributed. It's a supplemental for, regarding motion 13-183, the Rec Center Task Force recommendation. And then in addition to that document, you have two documents provided by Mr. Burgoyne. One is a memorandum dated November the 15th, and the second is an email from Sunday, November the 17th. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening? No? Then I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Support.
Support by Mr. Rhodes. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll dispense with that motion. And first up, prior to citizen comments on agenda items, is our quarterly presentation from Saline Main Street. And I believe, Director Bob Rosenberger is here, and I believe the board president, Ms. Yupko, is here as well. If you'd like to come forward, we would welcome that.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects, Saline Main Street. This is a quarterly review, so we'll be looking at the months of July, August, and September, the third quarter of the year. And I believe you have some documents in front of you. Cool. So I'll start with organization, and I'll just try to hit the highlights since you have this to look at, and you can ask questions as we go along. So volunteer hours, proud to announce that for the 3 months, July, August, and September, we had over 1,700 volunteer hours, which is pretty exciting stuff. Actually, for the year, January through September, we've had 3,877 volunteer hours, which is about $85,000 worth of labor, which is pretty exciting stuff. We have great volunteers in Saline, and we're fortunate with that. Fundraising that took place during July, August, and September, we had just over $9,000 in funds raised, which is also exciting. We did lose a board member I believe it was August. Mr. David Fries left. He is now the Rotary president, and that's sort of an all-consuming job, so he stepped down because he wanted to be sure that he was giving his all to that, and he didn't feel like he could give his all to Saline Main Street at the time. In July, we had a strategic planning session. We worked with Michigan Main Street to create our goals for 2014, and we are currently finalizing our work plans for 2014 based on the information and all that we gathered from the strategic planning session. Downtown Matters is a campaign that we're working on currently. Downtown Matters is a new campaign that will help grow awareness of who we are and what we do, and hopefully help people see the benefits of volunteering with and contributing to an organization that helps keep our downtown alive, thriving, and growing. We're also working with a capstone class specifically with that project, and that's pretty exciting. Probably, if you've looked at our website, you've seen the testimonials. We've been getting testimonials from different people in town throughout the city leaders and different functions to show why Main Street, not Main Street, but downtown is the core of the city and why it's so important. We thank everyone for all their involvement with the testimonials. Next, I'll talk about promotions, the promotion team. Promotion team during the months of July, August, and September. I can do that. There we go. July, August, and September. The Summer Music Series actually took place June through August, but we report to the Michigan Main Street at the end after an event like that is completed. So that's why you see this in our quarterly report here. We had about 2,500. It's hard to estimate. You have to estimate because we don't take attendance and there's no gate. But we figure we had about 2,500 participants, people there to watch the different entertainment throughout the summer. It was a good event, and I think we had some great entertainment. Mastodon was a first-time event. Mastodon Mayhem Challenge. We ran it in coordination with the Celtic Festival. Thank you to the Celtic Festival for all your help with that. And I think it was a great success. We had 137 runners, but we also had not participants, but spectators. People who just came out to see what it was all about. They got muddy, they got a mess, and they had a great time, so it was fun. And Oktoberfest was a wonderful event. We had 3,500 people there, and that was exciting as well. Thank you to the city for allowing us to do all that, and to DPW for all their hard work helping us put all that together, and that's much appreciated, definitely. The design team, Benito's moved in August of this past year. They did renovations both to their interior and exterior, and that's why they are listed with the design team. The trash cans downtown, the trash receptacles were painted. We thank Sharon Zahn for that. She took that project on all by herself and was the lone painter of the trash receptacles, and she did a wonderful job, and they look good. They look really nice downtown. The Leather Bucket Alley was also a project that we took on, and that came to fruition, well, mostly to fruition this last quarter. Leather Bucket Alley, as you know, is the alley behind Mangiamo's and Breck and Grill, and we had a dedication in August for that alley. We want to thank Valley City Signs, because Valley City Signs did the archway, and when it came out, when it was delivered and put in place, the top of the arch didn't quite meet what we were hoping for. And so we talked to them about that, and they gave us a price to fix it, and it was well beyond what we had. And they went ahead and fixed it on their own, on their dime, which is really nice. So thanks to Valley City Signs for that. As you know, probably we had a naming contest for the alley. The name that was chosen was Leather Bucket Alley. The story behind that, you all know, is because that's where they used to store the leather buckets that they used to put out fires. The firehouse used to be where Maureen's flowers are now. So exciting stuff, and that's looking really pretty. The alleyway is a nice addition to our downtown. Excuse me. And thanks to Nature's Garden for helping us have another successful year of Bee Bloomin', which is a summertime beautification project downtown. Nature's Garden did that for us the first time this year, and when we ran out of money, when the budget was used up, let's put it that way, they continued to water the flowers on their own expense, so that the flowers would look good for a long time. And I think they did look beautiful for a very long time. The BES team, or Business and Economic Success team, two things I'd like to talk about. We have two new members. Nathan Vogt is a Washtenaw County employee, but he also brings Main Street experience to the table. He was the Main Street manager in Howell for quite a while, so he really brings a lot of experience, and we're looking forward to working with him. Already he's made contributions. And we also have a new team leader. We've been looking for a new team leader. Many of you know Carolyn Price. She wanted to be here this evening, but she is without power and scrambling to keep her food cold and her freezer and refrigerator going. And the other thing that I want to mention is the market study. The market study was part of a grant that we got through Michigan Main Street. The grant was was worth about $25,000 round figures, and the market study was put on by the team along with help from a consultant. We had some really interesting results. The market study is available on our website, SalineMainStreet.org, and I've got an eye test. I've got copies, but we tried to run them at City Hall today, and this is an 11 by 17 page, but we couldn't get it, so we only got it on 8.5 by 11. So I'll let you look at these. Your eyes are better than mine. A couple of interesting things that happened with the study, or the study gave us. We surveyed downtown business and property owners. We did an online consumer survey and an intercept survey where we talked to people when they came downtown to visit. We talked to a little more than 350 people. And a couple of interesting things. One is that downtown Saline, compared to other places that the survey respondents shop, where they shop or do business, we rated stronger or equal to other places where they visit for cleanliness, 98%, attractiveness, 94%, customer service, 89%, quality of festivals and events, 88%, quality of products and service, 83%. I mean, those are really strong numbers, and Jay Schlinsog, who was our consultant, was amazed at those kinds of numbers. I mean, he calls Saline a special place. We knew. Business expansion, consumer and business survey participants place a high priority on business expansion and recruitment efforts. In other words, they're looking to see our downtown expand and grow and become an even stronger and better business place. What they would like to see, some things they'd like to see are food services, I should say, and drinking places, like full-service restaurants, limited service eating places, a brew pub. They would like food and beverage stores, like specialty stores or boutique markets, beer, wine, and liquor stores, miscellaneous store retailers, like a bookstore or gift novelty souvenir stores, things like that. Services also play, as you know, an important role in generating consistent traffic to support our economy and the vitality of our downtown. And one interesting fact that I pulled out of the survey from our data was that there are more people in Saline during the day than there are at night, which means that we have a lot of visitors, a lot of people who come here to shop, to dine, to work, to visit. So I think that's exciting, and it says a lot about our community. Questions about Saline Main Street, the last quarter?
Thank you, Bob. Are there any questions? Mr. Rhodes.
A couple comments and then a question. One, I also was surprised at those numbers because I've always sort of had this mental model of Saline being basically a bedroom community to bigger cities around us, and that's not true at all. There are, in fact, more people who come to Saline to work than leave to work other places. And I'm really pleased with all the work that Main Street is doing and all the activity that's going on. I did have one question on the promotion handout that is here. It has tickets sold under summer music, and I'm wondering if that is true or if it was meant to be something else.
Yeah, that's a misprint. I apologize. That's my
Okay.
fault.
Right.
We didn't sell tickets to the summer music
I
series.
didn't
That's
think so.
come and have fun event. So
Okay,
thank
thank
you
you.
for catching that.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Are there additional comments or questions? No? Bob, keep up the good work. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the opportunity.
Okay, we move on now to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? No? Then we move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Is there a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Been moved by Rhodes to approve as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 13-180, ordinance to amend the downtown form-based code DFBC. This will be a motion to adopt or not adopt. Ordinance number 751, an ordinance to amend the City of Saline zoning ordinance to provide for and regulate, the Downtown Form-Based Code District, DHBC, with Downtown Core D1 and Downtown Edge D2 districts. Is there a motion?
I would move to adopt with some suggested changes.
Okay, do you want to suggest those now, Mr. Rhodes?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's probably appropriate. As many of you know, the 100 block of West Michigan has been designated D1 and D2. It's split between those two zoning overlays. And I would like to request that we ask of our Planning Commission to reconsider that zoning split so that that block of 100 West Michigan would result in a zoning that would be more compatible with the rest of our downtown blocks. It would also, as a result of that change, D2 going to D1 would eliminate a couple of roadblocks that some potential developers see in that zoning.
So, Mr. Rhodes, as you were speaking, the clerk and I are attempting to draft an amendment to this motion. So what about adding something, of course, following districts and removing the period that read, and to recommend that the Planning Commission review the designation of the 100 West Michigan Ave block?
That would be appropriate,
I do believe.
I support it.
Okay?
You were looking at that to be D1?
D1.
D1. I
Yes.
just want to make sure I got that right.
Okay. So the amended motion has been moved by Mr. Rhodes and seconded by Mr. Burgoyne to adopt. We do have our city engineer, Superintendent Mr. Rubel here, as well as one of our planning consultants. If you two gentlemen would like to come forward and make any comments, certainly not necessary, but we would encourage that. And we'll open it up for questions and discussion on the motion.
Representing the consultant firm, Carlisle Wortman, Mr. Ben Carlisle here is in place of Doug Lewan, who had other commitments. But that's appropriate because Mr. Carlisle also presented the proposed amendment to the Planning Commission and outlined the three, well, they're really minor changes to the downtown form-based code, but we need them for clarification at this time to deal with some existing circumstances or potential improvements. So if you would like him to cover those three before the hearing or not, that's your prerogative.
Is there any consensus from council? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Ben Carlisle with Carlisle Wortman Associates. As Mr. Rubel alluded to, there were three relatively minor amendments to the proposed zoning language for the downtown district. These were more cleanup, and they're actually caught by people who use the code every day, including the zoning administrator who recommended these changes. The first one was in regards to page 5. It's simply this cleans up language in regards to screening requirements, adds more detail, and brings this into consistency with the other sections of the ordinance that require screening. So really, it's just to make sure that the ordinance is consistent with the rest of the zoning ordinance in regards to screening. The second change was on page 6, and this gives the Planning Commission flexibility to waive and modify landscape requirements. There are 2 standards under which they will review to modify those standards, those requirements, but it just gives more flexibility for the development community as well as the Planning Commission to waive some of those requirements if they find justification. And the third is in regards to the status and how we treat single-family residential properties in the district. Single-family residential is a permitted use in the D2. It's not permitted in the D1. However, there are existing, and we recognize there are existing single-family properties in those districts. And how we treat them moving forward is important. This simply states that they are exempt from the regulations of the D1. However, they do have to follow the bulk height and area setbacks set forth in C1. So that those moving forward, that's how we're going to treat single-family properties in those districts. So those are the 3 minor changes. It was voted unanimously and forwarded by the Planning Commission.
Very good. Thank you, sir. There questions for our guest or for Mr. Rubel? No? Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Any additional discussion regarding the amended motion? Mr. Peters first.
Just to say that I support Councilmember Rhodes' suggestion to make that from D2 to D3, I think. If that's what it takes, if that helps to fill that space, and that's in the best interest of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Ms. Tahar?
Yes, on the same topic, a question for background information. I believe this suggestion has come to the zoning commission before, the change from D2 to D1, and wondered if members of the planning commission could expand a little bit on why the suggestion wasn't acted upon earlier.
I would say Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Gearbaugh can correct me if I'm wrong. Of course, Mr. Gearbaugh serves as a voting member of the Planning Commission, and Mr. Rhodes has been gracious enough to attend a number of the commission meetings. I think the issue has been discussed sort of casually, and I use the word casually strategically, certainly not in an in-depth or comprehensive way. And I think, speaking solely for myself, it was the feeling that it really wasn't appropriate to make the change in conjunction with these minor housekeeping adjustments, as our guest and Mr. Rubel articulated. So to that point, I'm very much in favor and support the amendment, Mr. Rhodes' amendment. Obviously, I think it goes without saying that a redevelopment of the 100 West Michigan block is in this community's, it's a vital interest. And we want to see a development flourish and prosper there in perpetuity. And there are a number of market factors that are already sort of inhibiting development. And so I want to make sure that there's nothing that we have in place in terms of a policy that's adding to that burden. So unless Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Gearbaugh care to elaborate.
I think you stated that very well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this change would give us more options on it. I mean, there are some considerations regarding how parking and everything is on it, but this presents some other alternatives that can be used in order to possibly give a better way of developing this property with the way it is, not necessarily acquiring other properties or whatever. But the way it is right now, I think it's too restricted, and it may be too restricted in order for us to get it to move forward a better way than we currently have. I think most of the community wants to see that property move forward, become a productive piece of revenue generating for the city.
Please.
So if I'm understanding correctly, an in-depth discussion of this has not yet been undertaken by the Planning Commission.
That would be correct. That
Okay,
would be
thank
how
you.
I would define it.
Okay, thanks.
Additional questions or comments regarding this amended motion? No? Then it's been properly moved by Rhodes and seconded by Burgoyne to adopt with some additional language. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We now move on to new business item 13-181. This is group health care. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 4th, 2013 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not approve the Employee Health Care Committee recommendation as submitted.
Move to approve.
Been moved by Gearbaugh. Is there to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. Mr. Campbell, and I guess for the audience benefit, we've actually discussed this proposal on two separate occasions, so you probably will not be hearing a lot of questions and comments from the dais. But for the audience benefit, and especially for those who are going to be reviewing this meeting at home or online, I would turn it over to Mr. Campbell at this time to maybe give a brief overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, the city utilizes an employee committee made up of the various bargaining units and non-union representatives, and this is our second year doing so. And the group comes together, we evaluate the proposed health benefit renewal rates, and now for the third year, now that the state legislature has imposed Public Act 152, which gives municipalities, the public employers, a choice of maximum amount that they can contribute towards funding of employee health benefits. And once again, the committee is proposing what's called the hard cap, which the hard cap sets limits on how much the city can pay towards a single person health insurance, two-person and family health insurances. And any cost above that, for instance, would be required to come from contributions from the employee. We had an excellent year of experience that these numbers are related to, and we actually saw about a 2.9% or so decrease in premiums. However, overall, we saw about a 2.9% increase as the additional fees and taxes from the Affordable Care Act, the federal law that's gone into effect. So overall, about a 2.9% increase, which also the hard cap, as I mentioned, every year Department of Treasury establishes what the increase to that level is of the hard cap, and that's based on the CPI for medical, and so Treasury determined that to be 2.9%. So as you keep hearing the 2.9%, so it was almost what I would say almost a wash. So as you can see from my memo, the recommendation would be to continue with the hard cap for a third year and allow 5 options currently offered to the city employees as presented. The Simply Blue PPO, $3,000, $6,000, 100% coverage, Simply Blue PPO, $3,000, $6,000 deductible, 80% coverage, and those are both with the HSA accounts. And then the Simply Blue PPO without HSA, and that's a $500 and $1,000 deductible with 80% coverage, and then Blue Care Network HMO, and then lastly, again, this another Simply Blue PPO, $3,000, $6,000 HSA, 100% HSA deductible contribution. So the money for this particular one, the monies would go first towards the HSA deductible and not the premiums, and then the employee would be responsible for making up any premium that was left over. Any questions? I'd be happy to entertain those.
Any questions for Mr. Campbell? Any comments? Mr. Gearbaugh.
I'm just glad that we were able to maintain pretty much what we've been giving as benefits in the past with only a 3% increase to our costs. I would like to also mention that our dental and vision costs went down this year, so I think in the future, as we look at a total package of benefits, we can contribute some of those expenses and stuff and just determine what's going on. But at least with the hard cap, we did maintain a recent CPI inflation increase, so that was better than having a major hit this year.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any additional comments, Mr. Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the committee for a great teamwork and all the employees, because when we met a few times, determined what we believed to be the best recommendation. Then before we brought that to council, we also went back to our respective groups that we represent and explained that, and brought feedback back to the last meeting where we detailed and refined the recommendation for council. So it's been a total participation, and with certainly now, I mean, I believe we've been in this all together, been in this together from the beginning, but certainly now with all the changes in the law, whether it's Public Act 152, as well as Affordable Health Care Act, we are all in this together as employees, no matter union, non-union. So thank you for a lot of great cooperation, a lot of great teamwork.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I think I speak for all of council when we thank you and every member of the team for their important work on this matter. It's very much appreciated. Are there any additional comments? No, then it's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Roth to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Move on to new business item 13-182. This will be a resolution to approve the submittal of the SAW grant. This will be a motion to adopt or not adopt the resolution authorizing the SAW grant agreement. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt.
Moved by Peters to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tahar. I would welcome Mr. Gary Rubel, our city engineer superintendent, to the podium, as well as Vic Cooperwasser, our consultant from Tetra Tech. This is also an issue we've had a number of meetings on. We've been very thorough and deliberate as it relates to this matter, so you might not hear a lot of discussion and comments from questions from the dais, but it is very important, and we appreciate these two gentlemen, all the work they put into this matter. So, Mr. Rubel.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Just a brief synopsis before I introduce Vic. That about 2 years ago, Bob Scull, our wastewater plant superintendent, came to me at about the time we were beginning to look at the CIP updates for the budget for that year. And he had some serious concerns about several areas of the wastewater plant, aged unsafe equipment and, processes. And so I drafted a letter to City Manager Campbell, and we proceeded to consider recommendations. We brought forth a proposal to council from Tetra Tech to address those. Subsequently, several measures have been taken on and accomplished, and you're well aware of those. The initial study, the subsequent initiation of the rehabilitation phase 1, which involves about $1.2 million, $1.3 million in improvements, very needed improvements to critical components of the wastewater plant processes. And then with the likelihood that we would do a phase 2. We also, with that, came up the opportunity of the S2 grants through the DEQ. We applied for 2 phases of the S2 grant. Happily to say we have already $130,000 reimbursements from those 90% grants for the study phase, drafting the project plan, and doing the design engineering for phase 1 rehabilitation. Tetra Tech announced to us that they had heard where the S2 is going to require a mandate to do asset management program for wastewater, water mains, and sewer, and also they would allow for stormwater management, asset management. At that point, we decided to engage Tetra Tech because that grant, if we applied for the SAW grant, we would obtain 90% reimbursement for establishing the asset management program. So at a meeting about 2 months ago, the City Council authorized Tetra Tech to put together a draft of a program, a SAW grant program, outlining the details and tasks that would affect asset management, accomplish those tasks through various measures, monitoring of sewers, improving the GIS system, and a number of other measures, as well as we also approved before that, or actually after that, the water and rate sewer study component, which is integral, of course, to moving forward with future grants from the DEQ, as well as enhancing the full development of our capital improvement plan, and also those water and sewer rates or sewer rates especially that are required for a component to reinforce and get points towards the SAW grant award. So with that brings us sort of up to date what transpired over the 2 busy years of activities in water and wastewater. We appreciate council's diligence, patience, and understanding and good input in all of that. And so with that, I would introduce Vic Cooperwasser, who is the lead for not only in the water and sewer, but drafting up some of the grant proposals and filling out the applications. He's here representing Tetra Tech and also on behalf of Brian Rubel, who's their principal engineer for this type of work. We've gotten very good results in the last 2 years from Tetra Tech, and the successes in all phases have shown that.
Thank you, Mr. Rubel.
Yeah, thank you. The SAW grant program, SAW stands for Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater. It's a grant program that's administered by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. Applications are going to be received around the state from communities around the state December 2nd on a first-come, first-served basis. The demand for the funds is expected to exceed supply. It's critical to have the applications submitted by December 2nd. If demand exceeds supply, the state's going to go to a lottery program. The grant does require a 10% match, but the city staff time is also reimbursed at 90%. So the net out-of-pocket cost to the city is minimal. And the city staff have requested funds for doing both the wastewater and a stormwater asset management plan. The wastewater asset management plan involves an asset inventory, asset condition assessment, capacity analysis, updating your GIS system, utility rate analysis, capital improvement planning, and an asset management report. Now, the asset management for wastewater is going to be a requirement of your permit probably at the next renewal, I think, in 2014. And thus, this grant program is basically going to pay for that permit requirement. By accepting the grant, the city commits to getting the asset management plan done in 3 years and that it will adapt a rate structure that will close any funding gap by 10% in the first year. However, any projects that are in the asset management plan are going to be reviewed with the city for affordability. There won't be anything in the plan that goes outside the bounds of what you feel is affordable. Our budget for preparing the asset management plan is $585,000, and that's 90% reimbursable. On the stormwater side, the stormwater asset management plan is similar, has similar steps. However, it's focused on the stormwater infrastructure and its ability to control flooding. This is separate from the city's stormwater NPDES permit, which is focused on stormwater quality. There is no regulatory requirement to implement a stormwater asset management plan, but the city staff felt it would be valuable to have one. And because stormwater drainage flood control is not regulated by the state or federal government, requirements to implement stormwater asset management plan are much less restrictive than the wastewater. Accepting a stormwater grant only requires the plan to be maintained beginning in year 3. The state hasn't defined the word maintain very well, but it's reasonable to assume that it means that the plan should be periodically updated and capital improvements implemented to the extent that your finances allow. Because flood control is not regulated, the stormwater capital improvements can be planned over longer periods of time to minimize financial impact on the budget. The Tetra Tech budget to prepare a stormwater asset management plan is $421,000. So the actions needed tonight is to pass the grant resolution to authorize Mr. Campbell to submit the application for the grants, and the resolution is a critical part of the grant application. And the number in the resolution is an upper limit for any requested funds. So the actual amount could be less. What's in the grant resolution is a maximum number. That summarizes the program.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cooperwasser. We appreciate that. Are there any questions for our guest or for Mr. Rubel? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just real quick, earlier when we were having the work session discussion, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar had brought up the idea of what items would be mandatory that we would have to have in order to get our permit. Can you identify those on our list on the sheet, which those would be?
The wastewater asset management plan,
Yes.
those items are going to be in your next wastewater plant permit.
So everything on this side, you're saying is full $500,000? Or just the survey and inventory issues?
Yeah, the items on the wastewater side that should total about $585,000. Yeah, that's going to.
So all of those will be required by us regardless of whether we get the grant
That's
or not?
correct. That's correct. The city of Jackson just went through this, and theirs went into effect September 30th. And other communities are getting their permits, their new permits. And this is a new requirement called Asset Management Program. And we have the wording, all of that is going to be required. Yes.
I was just going to say, so all the software and all this other activity, so like the $70,000 or $120,000 in software is going to be required?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're not going to, it's not going to require to, it's not going to be a requirement to have the software. The software, the hardware, and the training, the grant program gives you an allowance based on community size. So, right, you don't have to have that. This is a tool that the state is funding for you. They're paying for that hardware.
No, where I'm looking at is if we don't get the grant and we're down 2 years down the road trying to get our permit renewed, what's the minimum amount out of here that we would have to incur? I guess that's kind of where we were looking at.
Well, that's a good question.
I was just wondering if it's just the system inventory and the asset condition assessment and the rate structure analysis.
Right. Right. Yeah, certainly the system inventory, the condition assessment, capacity study, now the sewer cleaning and televising, that's a means to assess, to do the assessment. So the amount that's in there for sewer cleaning and televising, it depends on how much you're going to feel you're going to need to do to meet the requirement of the permit at that time. It doesn't mean that you're cleaning and televising the entire system.
Right.
There'll be a discussion on level of service in terms of defining the limits that you expect the plant to work at in the sewer system. The rate structure analysis will be required. You'll be required to do a 5-year analysis to look at the capital improvements that are proposed in the asset management plan and to look ahead for the next 5 years to see that rates are going to be adjusted to meet the needs of the asset management plan. That's going to be required. The asset management plan report is going to be required, and what's going to be required is an annual update in the permit. You're going to have to look at that report every year and assess the activities you've done the year before and see if you have accomplished the work that was laid out in the asset management plan. So if the asset management plan shows a project to be done in 2 years, was that project done? Was something else done? And so it's going to be a living document that is going to be tied to the wastewater plant permit that is going to have to be submitted to the state every year. This is going to be ongoing.
Well, and that's what I wondered. So one way or the other, we're beneficial if we get this grant because we're going to have to come up with $500,000 pretty much either way to do this.
There's absolutely no question. What they're doing is paying for setting this up.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Additional questions, Mr. Roth?
I just want to kind of get the concept clear in my mind. This is something that's going to be required. It's a reporting system.
Yes.
And your company, Tetra Tech, will be the one doing this. So we are committed to Tetra Tech for updating these reports, having studies done every 5 years. Who actually owns this report? Can our person in charge of DPW or the city itself manage and do these reports in the future, or are we tied to your firm?
No, you're not tied to us at all. We've given you a proposal. The proposal we've given you is what's called in the application form supporting documentation to present an estimate of what this would cost to get this set up, the asset management plan, and to get it done in about 2 or 3 years. You're under no obligation to hire Tetra Tech to do this. You're under no obligation to execute a contract with Tetra Tech. If you get the grant, then it'll be up to the city to decide who they want to use. But we've given you a proposal to do the work. When it comes to the annual updates that the city will be required to submit to the DEQ, I would imagine that after the system is set up, after I think we have 2 or 3 years in the budget to set it up, the city would be obligated to update the report annually. They can do that with their own staff. The DEQ's intent is for the cities to take more of an active role in the asset management and sustainability of the plant. Obviously, it would be up to the city if they wanted to retain Tetra Tech to provide assistance for the annual updates, but they wouldn't have to at all. You would have a report, a spreadsheet that you would update to submit to the DEQ. You would not have to use Tetra Tech or any consultant to do that. That would be a city decision to decide to do that. You would not be committing yourself to use Tetra Tech for that.
It appears to me a big price tag for just asset management that's imposed upon cities to get a permit. That seems to be something's driving that I'm not too sure what it is.
State mandate.
Well, I'm just kind of questioning why is the state mandating this? Is there some going along as far as lobbying to get work for consultants?
I can't answer that. I can't speak for the DEQ or the state as to why they're doing this, other than they're looking to communities to look at the issue of sustainability of infrastructure. And they're offering a program to help pay to set it up for the wastewater system.
And are you getting a fee, or for your firm getting a fee for filling out this application for us?
I believe there is an agreement for us for filling out the form, yes.
I believe it's 6,000.
Yeah.
Okay, that's been included in our budgets?
And that 6,000 is also in here for the 90% reimbursement. That's also reimbursable 90%, assuming you get the grant.
So we're going to have to pay 6,000, and if we get money back, then we cover 90% of it.
Right, you submit the Tetra Tech invoice monthly, you submit invoices monthly to the state, including invoices for your own staff time, and the state reimburses you 90%.
So this is state mandate that's going to cost the city money.
If we don't get the grant.
But
Well, get the grant or not get the grant, it's costing us money.
And regrettably, there have been and will continue to be a number of those. And it's not just mandates that are unfunded from the state government, they also exist, of course, from the federal government.
I just want to make sure that this
Yep.
was clearly understood by everybody.
And as Mr. Cooperwasser indicated, perhaps the saving grace on this one is that if we receive the grant, we get a substantial, overwhelming portion of the project funded. Those are good questions, Mr. Roth. Were there additional questions? Mr. Burgoyne.
Just a comment. My impression of this is that since we can use in-kind services, that our cost will be about 2% of the entire project. And when you pay 2% and you get computers out of it and you get something set up that you have to do anyway, it seems like a really good deal to me.
Additional questions or comments? No? Vic, appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you for your presentation. Are there additional comments? No? Okay. Then it's been properly moved by Peters, seconded by Tahar to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 13-183. This is the Rec Center Task Force recommendation. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 7th, 2013 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve or not approve the Rec Center Task Force recommendations as presented. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
It's been moved by Rhodes to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Peters. Ms. Scruggs.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here again to present the final recommendations from the Rec Task Force. As I made a presentation earlier about this, but the Rec Task Force started meeting in May, and we had about 6 meetings. And the group was consisted of our council rep, Gearbaugh, our mayor, city manager, myself, and 2 citizen representatives, Diane Waterhouse and Scott Fosdick. And we were tasked with a couple of goals. One was to improve the financial stability of the rec center and also to grow our membership by improving their experience. And I believe, I know this task force took this to heart and really worked through a lot of ideas and questions and looking at our fee structure and what amenities we had. We did a lot of comparisons to other facilities within a 10-mile radius of us. And we came up with the following recommendations that we're looking for approval to move on. The first one is to increase our annual fees by 10% based on the 2014 pricing. And in addition, offer 3 different payment types. One is to do a lump sum, which is the 10% increase. And it's a one-time payment. And again, like we currently have, if you renew prior to expiration, you would get a 5% discount. The second one, which is new, which would be a monthly electronic fund transfer or monthly payment with a 12-month contract. And this is priced just slightly higher in order to accommodate for the convenience and the additional administrative fees in order to make this happen. And then the third option for payment would be a monthly payment, which we currently have, that has no contractual obligation. You can join 1 month at a time and let it drop, and then, 2 months down the road, join for another month. So that would be priced high, a little bit higher than the monthly electronic fund transfer with a 12-month contract. And in your packet that you received, what we did is, just to explain briefly, we put together some projections. The membership numbers, which is the second column, those are based on our actual membership numbers from 2012 and 13, from that fiscal year. And we also, one of the other components that I'll talk about later is we took 85% of the non-resident members and put them into the resident category, based on if we would include the Saline Area School District as a resident status. So the numbers that you see here are actual numbers from 2012 and 13 with the additional school district residents put into that category. And we projected what it would, or how much money we would receive if everyone did a 10%, or did the lump sum payment, and then if they did the 12-month contract, and then the final column where it says single month, no contract, that's based on actual numbers of people that bought monthly memberships during 2012 and 13 with the suggested increase. So at the bottom, you would see a range, which would be the range being on the low end of the full lump sum payment to the monthly contract. So, for example, $672,420 to $832,013. That would be our range of revenue that we would receive. And how we got that, just to make sure that you understand, the $21,365 for the monthly fees are added into the 1 year paid full and the 12-month contract. Does that make sense? Okay, and then what we did in addition to that is we projected if we had a 2% growth in membership, 5%, 8%, and 10%, and how that translated into the revenue. On the sheet that I passed out this evening, it has what our original revenue numbers are and our expenses, so that you can kind of get a snapshot of how much currently we're budgeting for and how much of the expense that we need to make up. And with our recommended membership pricing, we will cover all of those costs and make sure that we're meeting all of our expenses. And we've also included the $150,000 general revenue or general fund contribution. So again, keeping in mind what our goal is to be financially stable. By making these changes, we will be meeting those numbers. In addition to the month or into the membership categories, we've added a couples membership. Currently, we have an individual and a family. And through some surveying and feedback from current customers and people that are not members, we've had that suggestion that we have a couples membership. A lot of people they used to have a family membership. Kids are now grown. They're out of the house, but they're still here. And rather than having to buy two individual memberships or a family membership, we would have a couples membership, which would be priced in between the two. Also, we would recommend that the member fees would include most of the land fitness classes. This is a trend that we're seeing among other facilities that we are competing with. So it would be a one-stop shop. Once you buy your membership, you'd be able to go to a body conditioning class or a spinning class or whatnot. So there wouldn't be any extra fees. It would not, and just for clarification, would not include all fitness classes, but a majority of fitness classes. We would also recommend that we increase our hours of operation. Currently, we're on Monday through Friday, 6 in the morning until 9 at night. We would recommend that we open a half an hour early at 5:30 in the morning and go until 10 o'clock at night. And then on the weekends, on Saturday, we're currently opening at 8 and we close at 6. And Sunday, we're open at noon and we close at 6. We would recommend going on weekend hours, 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. Again, this is information based on surveying that we've done in the past and feedback from current members and potential members as earlier hours. In addition, on some holidays have holiday hours. For example, on a Thanksgiving, have an early morning, 6 a.m. until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock or whatnot, just to get some exercise in before everyone indulges. It wouldn't necessarily be on every holiday, but I can imagine something on New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, 4th of July, kind of, shortened early hours for people to get workouts in. Another recommendation would be for family memberships to include a family extension plan. For example, a lot of people's house situations have changed. Elderly parents are living in the household or adult children are moving back home. We have, other, exchange students, au pairs, things like that we've been getting feedback on, and we would recommend that we would, for an additional fee, and with the approval of the Parks and Rec director, that someone would be able to add another additional adult person into the household. And then some other housekeeping changes. Currently, our daily fees and our membership fees, the child, we just need to make the ages the same. We would recommend that a child be from 3 to 17 years old. An adult would be 18 to 59, and a senior is 60 and older. Right now, our daily fees, children's rate is, or children ages is from 3 to 12, but our member fees are 3 to 17. So we just want to make them all the same. Then another recommendation is to adjust the daily fees to include the classes. So when you purchase a daily fee, you're upstairs working out or swimming and there's a spinning class or a fitness class going on, you're able to drop in on those. So there wouldn't be any additional fees. It gives you a membership for the day, essentially. And the recommendation is to leave our child rate the same, which is $5. The senior rate would go from $5 to $8, and the adult fee would go from $8 to $12. And one of the thoughts and concerns, it might seem like a large jump. However, our average drop-in class fees are average between $10 and $20 right now. This would actually average it out to be about, hold on, where are my notes here? Between $8 and $12. It would be like a $10 fee, an average drop-in fee for the day. And this isn't for everyone. This is, for people that, a lot of out-of-town guests, a lot of people that just don't want to have the membership and they just want to drop in occasionally. The drop-in fees would be for them. Obviously, purchasing a membership is the most economical way to go. For example, a senior who lives here in Saline that's a resident, it would end up costing 60 cents a day to have a membership if they were to choose to do that. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a recommendation would be to change our resident status to include the residents in the Saline Area School District. And Right now, our resident base is 9,000 people, and what this would do would be increase it to 28,000 people. And it would also, you know, I've talked about this before, but a lot of people have a Saline address, go to Saline schools, use the Saline library, feel part of Saline, but they might live right across the street and they're not a Saline resident in our eyes. So this would really embrace all of Saline. It would help us increase our ability to attract residents and get people in to use the facility. Marketing, we sent out RFPs, and they're actually due this Friday morning. They were sent to area marketing firms to get a price point on how much it would cost us to market this, all of these changes, to really roll this out and to make a big impact and to really get the word out to all the community. They would be helping us strategize and to, you know, get all of the marketing documents together for mailing and whatnot. And the implementation, we would recommend that we would roll this out January 1st, or actually January 2nd. We're closed on the 1st, with a kind of a soft rollout, and then really make a big marketing blitz for an open house that we would have near the end of February. So that's
That it?
that's a lot.
Very thorough.
Yeah.
Let's begin with questions for Director Scruggs. Mr. Burgoyne.
I have a question. I'm going to support this motion, but I still have a question. It appears to me that you have kind of a cold case mystery of a dozen years ago, where in fiscal year 2000 and fiscal year 2001, out of 15 years, those 2 years had 50% more membership. And would it be possible for you, your staff, or whatever, to continue kind of in a cold case mystery type of approach to try to figure that out at some point?
It's been on my mind since you asked that question, and I took another look at it today to try to figure out, you know, where, you know, I thought, well, maybe it was businesses, like our corporate membership had dropped slightly, but it really wasn't the case. So we will definitely keep that.
Sometimes a cold case cracks later on. You know,
Absolutely.
the mystery is found later
Absolutely.
on. Yeah.
Will do.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Additional questions? Mr. Roth.
The marketing blitz that you're planning, is that covered with your current budget figures, or is that going to be needing more?
We do have $6,000 allocated this fiscal year. I believe that, and I'll know a little bit more on Friday, but I believe we're going to need probably an additional $5,000 to really blitz this, to really make a huge impact and make sure people are aware of this. So we would probably need an additional $5,000.
Thank you.
Additional questions? No? Okay, how about comments? Thank you, Ms. Scruggs. You're welcome. Comments? Mr. Rhodes?
I move to approve this motion for a couple of reasons. One is I understand that something needs to be done to improve the revenue stream for the rec center, and I appreciate the efforts that the task force put into coming up with the recommendations. And also, if they're open on New Year's Day, I have a chance of fulfilling my New Year's resolutions for at least one day. Maybe. And I'm pleased to see that the revenue projections are such that we should be able to eliminate the support from the general fund, because that was an issue that I believe stopped us or prevented us, made us less likely to expand the membership area before. So I think that's a very good move. I did have one question on the rec center bond as to when that is going to be completed. So we're still making payments on that.
I believe it's 2023, 24.
It's a ways out, yeah. So one would hope that the revenue stream would continue to improve for the rec center so that those payments could also be balanced off then. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Are there additional comments? Well, let me say several things, and I'll try and keep them as brief as possible because Director Scruggs did an outstanding job outlining the recommendations, which I think is maybe the second or third time this body is seeing the proposal. And that was done strategically to give you enough time to digest it because there is a lot of substance there. Let me begin by thanking you all, my council colleagues, for indulging me and agreeing earlier this year to resurrect the Rec Center Sustainability Task Force, which was originally conceived by my predecessor back in 2011. And it goes without saying that our rec center is a great facility, it's a community asset, but it has struggled over the years financially, and we've all been aware of that. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that restatement of the problem is not a solution. And so we decided to we decided to go to work. Obviously, Director Scruggs does an outstanding job. Her leadership was invaluable in the process, as was that of City Manager Campbell. Mr. Gearbaugh always does an outstanding job and has a good grasp for numbers. But I have to say that our two citizen representatives also brought a lot to the table. Diane Waterhouse has used the facility, I think, since its inception, so she brought a great perspective from a customer. And then Scott Fosdick, of course, who comes from the banking sector, brought a lot of financial acumen. So it was a good group. We reviewed a lot of data, a significant amount of material, and today we are making some pretty profound recommendations. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that it's my hope that this is sort of a game-changing moment for the rec center and ultimately for the community. I think this brings our facility into the 21st century, embraces a lot of approaches and policies that have proven successful in other facilities, and I think will not only improve the financial viability of the facility, but also will improve its usability from a customer perspective. And I can't emphasize enough the point that Carla made. There's been a 20-year narrative that's existed in this community that if you don't live in Pittsfield Township or the city of Saline, of course you are welcome at the rec center, and we hope that you've had a membership for a number of years, but there's been a lot of people who've been turned off because they're not offered that discounted rate. And so I think it's imperative that we expand our market and that we implement some new tools and mechanisms by which to keep members, but also to make their experience worthwhile and enjoyable. So again, I want to thank the task force, city staff, Director Scruggs in particular, and like Mr. Rhodes, I enthusiastically endorse this motion and urge my colleagues to vote in the affirmative. Are there additional comments? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Rhodes and seconded by Peters to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Ms. Scruggs, because this is such an important issue and because there's a lot of substance in the proposal, I bet our friends from the Saline Post and the Saline Reporter would value a copy of the analysis. So maybe if you could get them a hard copy or something electronic, that would be great. And we look forward to hearing more from you related to the marketing campaign of this proposal as well. Thank you for being here. Yep. We move on now to new business item 13-184. This is budget amendments. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 12th, 2013 memos regarding first amended FY14 general fund budget, first amended FY14 major streets budget, first amended FY local streets budget, the first amended FY14 municipal street budget, the first FY14 recreation bond budget, the first amended FY14 recreation complex budget, the first amended FY14 sewer budget, and the first FY14 water budget. The first amended FY Fire Special Assessment Budget, the first amended FY Refuge Budget, the first amended FY SBA Municipal Building Budget, and the first amended FY14 Cemetery Fund. And to approve and adopt, or to not approve and adopt, the first amended FY14 budgets as submitted.
Motion to approve and adopt with additional wording. And I would like to propose additional wording.
Okay, why don't you propose that at this time then?
Okay, at the end where it says as submitted, comma, provided that Tifa pays for the Woodland Drive Tifa project either as suggested earlier or with the roadside line remaining entirely in the current fiscal year. So it's an option, you know, which way you do it, but basically it's for Tifa to pay for the Tifa project.
Can you repeat that,
Yes.
motion one more time, or the
Yes.
amendment, excuse me?
Yes. Comma, provided that Tifa pays for the Woodland Drive Tifa project, either as suggested earlier, or with the roadside line remaining entirely in the current fiscal year.
Can you repeat that? Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. We're going to have the city clerk repeat it once she's finished writing it out.
So after submitted, comma, provided that Tifa pays for Woodland Drive Tifa project either as suggested earlier or roadside line currently in the fiscal year.
Or with the roadside line remaining entirely in the current fiscal year. Yeah, that's just the option of not touching the roadside line. Either, I can explain how to do it either way, but I want to get it on the floor.
You get that, anything? Why don't you read it one more time?
That Tifa pays for the Woodland Drive Tifa project either as suggested earlier or with the roadside line as currently suggested in the fiscal year.
Remaining entirely
Remaining
in the current fiscal year.
entirely. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, my earlier suggestion was to overlap the year, but there are two ways to do it.
Yes.
So I'm putting this on the floor for
Yep, so
discussion.
Mr. Burgoyne has made a motion to approve and adopt the existing language with that supplemental sentence following submitted. Is there a second? There is no second, so the motion dies, okay? Is there a motion to approve and adopt?
I thought Mr. Roth.
I could second that.
You're seconding that? Okay, so it's been seconded by Mr. Roth. Okay? Ms. Bennett, do you want to speak to the motion and then maybe to Mr. Burgoyne's amendment?
Sure. What we should have thrown in there, so Brian, every time you said amended, you could also say first quarter, just a tongue twist. But this is, what we asked to do is each quarter, we try to make quarterly amendments. So any actions that happened in July, August, or September are presented before you now. These amendments that are presented before you include minor house cleaning stuff, including adjusting fund balance to the beginning, to the actual audited figures, and then, payouts and any costs that we recognized and knew at the time in the first quarter. Obviously, a cold case, I liked Lee's reference there. We continue to, this is a working document, and every time that something comes before the, before any one of the task force or the committees, it's going to come back to us. So we understand that there are things, including Carla's recommendation for possibly additional fees for marketing that will be probably presented to you at a later time. The understanding of the finance department was that the task force was reviewing the language addressing the TIFA amount, and we figured that they're meeting after this amended budget, so that in the event that that task force did make the recommendation, we would adjust and amend the street budget at that time. That's why it's not included in the documents before you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Are there questions for our city treasurer? Ms. Tahar?
Yes, thank you. Just for clarification, so the amendments were being presented reflect things that have happened in the past?
In the first three?
In the first, and they're completed?
Yes.
And the additional language refers to something that would happen in the future?
The additional language that Mr. Burgoyne added on to
Yes.
the thing, it is his recommendation that Tifa pays for this, and I believe the understanding was that that was reverted back to the task force to provide recommendations. So we do not have the recommendation from the task force at this time.
So that's something that has not yet happened.
Correct, but the understanding is that we would amend when we got that recommendation, if so requested.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions for our city treasurer? No? Thank you, Ms. Ben. Oh, Mr. Roth? Yep.
I was looking through this and looking for the TIFA sheets,
Tifa?
and it's not there.
No, it's not, because the task force, and then they're having their meeting on Monday. So that project hasn't been done yet. We would amend that after their recommendation and after their meetings.
So as the motion was written, it was not included as part of it.
Correct. The motion that has been amended is to change the, well, no, he did say that the TIFA budget, which is not presented before you tonight.
I just want to be clear that.
No, that's not what I said. I didn't say the TIFA budget. I said that would TIFA pay for Woodland Drive TIFA project, which is in the budgets you have tonight.
The Major Street budget includes an estimated amount of $190,000 for the Woodland Street project. That was amended from our original cost because it came in lower, and at the time that we did the budgeted figures, the TIFA board, there was a percentage, and that percentage is still included in the TIFA budget to contribute about $33,000 of that money. We have not amended the TIFA budget to pay that in full yet, so therefore we have not submitted in this proposal for the street budget to reflect that change.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a note, the typical protocol is that staff would present proposed budget amendments, for instance, in this case, to what we call our alphabet boards, the TIFA, LDFA, EDC boards, and then they would make a recommendation to approve specific amendments that would come back, that would come to the city council for your consideration.
Additional questions? Question, Mr. Burgoyne? No question, or is it comment?
I'll wait.
Okay. Are there any additional questions for staff? No? Ms. Bennett, thank you. Mr. Burgoyne, did you have a comment?
Well, my comment is that I can wait. I mean, I can wait for this to be reviewed by TIFA, but I would like to present them a proposed solution that would be compatible with whatever they want to do. There's several ways of doing it. The important thing is to not push off TIFA project onto the Saline taxpayers. So I'm willing to withdraw those extra words for now. But I would like to communicate with whoever is reviewing this for TIFA.
Okay, let me respond to that. I would appreciate if you would remove your amendment from the floor, because I would not vote for the motion as it is currently presented or amended, because as Mr. Campbell indicated, as well as Ms. Bennett, it is sort of a breach of protocol, for lack of a better way to articulate it. And I also want to make this very clear, because I think this is now the third time that I've said it. And I consider myself a very patient person, but I become annoyed when I have to constantly repeat myself. This issue has now been brought up for the third time to this dais at a regular council meeting about this TIFA issue specifically. And every time, the response has been that the LDFA TIFA task force will take a look at this and make a recommendation to city council and to the economic development boards. Mr. Gearbaugh, who sits on that task force, has agreed to bring it up for discussion, and that will be done. I also feel compelled at this time, Mr. Burgoyne, to respond to your memorandum dated November the 15th, and then also your email dated Sunday, or dated, this Sunday, November 17th. And I'm in reference to paragraph 5, in sort of a bizarre response to an email that Mr. Gearbaugh sends out. You say some nonsense about staff having backroom discussions and putting a proposal on the August 14th ballot for a street millage. which could not be further from the truth. Nothing to that extent was articulated on Saturday at our retreat or at any other time. It was simply an idea that was thrown out because we have to keep every option on the table as we continue to explore ways to fund capital projects. Secondarily, in your memo dated November the 15th, in the second to last paragraph, you used the verbiage in regards to staff, misimpressions and talking point spin. And again, I've made this point on many occasions that it is appropriate for anybody on this council to question and disagree with an opinion that's articulated by staff or a recommendation that is articulated to staff. That's fair game. But when you impugn integrity or motives, that's where I have to draw the line, and I have to say to anybody on council who would suggest that it's inappropriate. So again, to my previous point, the issues regarding TIFA will be forwarded and will be discussed at the LDFA TIFA Task Force. You and anyone else from this council or anyone else from the general public are welcome to attend. And then, of course, the TIFA budgets will be reviewed this coming Monday. That's a regular TIFA meeting. It's been on the calendar for the last Monday of the month in November for many, many years, and that those documents and those numbers will be forwarded to this council for review and approval. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you have a comment?
I just concur that we need to go to TIFA first to review this, and there are other projects and things that potentially could be done that would have a bigger and greater return for this city in its future. And when we look at the money in the TIFA, there are some significant decreases that are going to happen within a short period of time, and we have a number of other projects that want to be done in this city that we may need to have matching dollars, that we will not be able to use matching dollars out of the road funds or out of the general funds because we have other costs in place. So we have to look at every single dollar that comes out of the TIFA and compare it to how we're going to spend it and get the best investment. Could we save a little bit by doing the roads out of there? Possibly, but then we're going to forego something else with another opportunity cost. I would like to believe that our board has some idea that they can be presented with this information and can make a decision that would recommend to our council and not necessarily be a one-sided decision based on a one-term or a one-year savings that may not benefit the city of Saline.
Are there additional comments?
Yes.
Mr. Roth.
I second it, and the reason I second it is that we could, rather than have the issue die as it is, and would like to have the discussion. I appreciate the input that was given. And before your statement, Mr. Mayor, that I would have voted no, even though I second such, once I got further information as far as where we are, what actually was submitted to us. So when I got clarification on that, I knew where I stood. So I would like to see the amendments removed.
Okay.
Well, I did ask to remove it.
Okay, so the mover and the seconder have requested that the amendment be dropped, so it shall be done. I will now at this time entertain a motion to approve and adopt the motion number 13-184 as it is expressed on your agenda this evening.
I'll move that.
Okay, it's been moved by Roth to approve
Second.
and adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tahar. Any discussion? Mr. Rhodes.
Just a couple of questions. The cemetery fund report budget, and this is not to do with what has already occurred, but based on the information that was presented to us at Planning Commission, or Planning meeting, I'd like to ask that a consideration be considered, that it be considered to add an expense item to cover placement of location markers, permanent location markers at the cemetery, as a potential expense for future. And then under major streets, there's a mention of metro projects, and I was just looking for a definition of what metro projects are, what that means.
The Metro money is additional funds that are received into the Major Street fund from the state of Michigan, separate from the Act 51 monies that are received. And they're earmarked and allocated for improvements on the right-of-way or the extensions and stuff like that as they are associated with the Major Street system. Okay. Clear? Yeah.
Yeah, just didn't know what that was. Yeah. And then my last comment was under the general fund, It looks like we have eliminated our $1,000 support for the DARE program, and I'm wondering if we are not supporting DARE anymore, or is it being funded some other way?
We're under the general fund. Where do you see that, sir?
And I don't know what page that was on, but
Oh, okay, I see. It wasn't in the cover memo that you were referring to.
no, I picked it up out of the report itself. It has a lot of data in it, and I appreciate the formatting of this report. Okay, that would be line item
What page are you on?
101.
Page 5?
Page 5. Page number.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, this is the line item that you're referring to is the, trying to
Title
find DARE,
Committed DARE, yeah.
699017.
Correct.
Okay, that's just the amount that was carried over. That's the amount that's committed to be reserved for the DARE program. We're still funding the DARE program, but this is just changing the year-end balance because we didn't have the $1,000 to be committed from last year and carried over into the next year's budget. We spent it in the prior year. We're still funding it. This is just the commitment, in our fund balances. This is just taking that out of there because we didn't actually have $1,000 to commit for FY14.
It was a placeholder for an encumbrance, and basically this year, we spent it last year instead of spending it this year.
We anticipated that we would have that 1,000 left that we were going to need to commit because it was raised specifically for DARE, but we spent it in the FY13. So it doesn't need to be on here.
So next year's budget will have,
Whatever's left if we
Monies
haven't
back in.
spent. So if we get contributions or anything for DARE, we reserve it at the end of the year or commit it.
got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Good questions. Additional comments or questions for staff? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Since we did the rec thing, and I know you kind of explained it, when will we anticipate seeing a revised rec budget based on our new recommendations? The first quarter of January, or?
Based on the recommendations that were presented tonight?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we would hope to have second amended budgets to you probably January or February.
Okay.
Probably February.
I'm just curious to see how it all rolls out.
Yep.
Okay.
As soon as those numbers come into fruition and we, have a good grip on the actual estimates, then we will put that in our second amended budget. And my goal would be to have that to you in February. The holidays, January might be a little questionable.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Additional comments? Mr. Peters?
One more, yeah. I'm not sure this is the right time or place for this, but I'll just offer for a suggestion. About a little over a year ago, we put out a moratorium on selling city water to contractors outside the city. And the intent was to try to retard or to stop hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing, to me, whether you like it or not, doesn't belong here at the city council level, it belongs to state and federal level. But in any case, by not selling that water, not selling that water to outside contractors has done nothing to achieve its goal, which I believe was to try to stop hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing goes on. In fact, to my recollection, right now, there is no pending legislation in Lansing to stop hydraulic fracturing. In fact, it's only to regulate the chemicals go into the water. I think we can all agree with that. So I just want to bring up the point that I don't think it's right that we should deprive the city out of a revenue source for something like this. We could be making money on selling city water to licensed legal contractors who have many uses for this water, whether it's filling swimming pools or making concrete or farming, whatever they want to do. So I'd like to recommend that we either put some kind of an end date on this moratorium or give this some more discussion, because I don't think it's achieved its goal, and I think all we're doing is missing on revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Peters, and we can add that as a discussion item to one of our upcoming council agendas.
Thank you.
Yep. Additional comments or questions? No? Okay, then it's been properly moved by Roth, seconded by Tahar to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to new business item 13-185. This is sign design for the Leather Bucket Alley. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated November the 13th, 2013 from Rebecca Schneider and to approve or not approve Leather Bucket Alley sign design as submitted. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
It's been moved by Councilmember Rhodes to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Peters. I know that Ms. Snyder is not here this evening, but our board president and executive director of Saline Main Street are. Do you care to make any comment, or? Memo kind of speaks for itself. Yep. Okay. Any questions for our guests? No? Any discussion? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We move on to new business item 13-186. This is 2014 City Council meeting dates. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated November 13th, 2013 from Clerk Royal, and to approve or not to approve the 2014 City Council meeting dates as submitted.
Move to approve.
Been moved by Mr. Gearbaugh to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tahar. Any discussion? No? Then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to commission, committee, or task force reports. None? Oh, Mr.
I'll
Peters.
give an update on the Salt Springs Park. Week before last, Bob Lane from the Saline Area Historic Society and myself, we accompanied a reporter from the Observer down to the Salt Springs to do a story, and just last week, we accompanied a reporter from the Post down at Salt Springs to do a story. So it's still garnishing some interest and attention. Hopefully, we keep our eyes open for those articles. We had the southern border surveyed, so we got that accomplished. And we're working on an Eagle Scout project that will help us restore the pipeline maintenance road, hopefully sometime this spring, so there'll be a great benefit to the community if we can get that done.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. There are additional commission or committee reports? No? Okay. What about reports or other announcements? Mr. Rhodes.
I would like to let everyone know that I attended the Huron Valley Ambulance Open House last Thursday, and I have left some information for each of the council members here. Not sure that I had enough to complete package for everyone, but I was really impressed with that group. They are a nonprofit organization. They receive no tax revenues. They have 656 employees at the current time and a $50 million annual budget. They also, in addition to the 911 calls that they receive, they have a dispatch center. They all have a separate dispatch center for 211 calls. And when I found that out, I went out to my truck and brought in some copies of the Resident Support Services Task Force Excel spreadsheet and gave to them, and they were appreciative of that. Every ambulance that they have is outfitted in exactly the same manner. Everything is in the same position in every one, so it doesn't matter which of their paramedics gets into which ambulance. They know exactly where to go for their materials. They cover areas as far west as Albion and north. I've forgotten now exactly where they go, but it's a much larger area than I thought it was. And it's a very well-run, well-organized, well-trained organization. And they are 501c3, so anyone who's so inclined to provide a donation to them, I'm sure they would appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you for attending that, Mr. Rhodes, and providing us with the material. I'm very familiar with the organization, and it is exceptional. They provide a great service, and I actually was honored to be present, I think, 2 years ago at an anniversary reception they had at their facility at State Circle. And I was reminded that they filled a void in the late 80s when the previous service that had existed in Washtenaw County essentially went broke and belly up. So they stepped in to provide a very critical, fundamental service at a very important time and have done an outstanding job ever since. So thank you for providing us with those materials. Are there any other reports or announcements? I just have two. I received a number of communiques, one from George Peralt and another one from Bob Krasinski, who were very complimentary, or very had a lot of compliments to say about the city and the council in particular in regards to hosting a veterans reception a few weeks ago. They were very touched, and they wanted me to extend their sincere thanks to the entire body. And then in addition to that, the proclamations and tributes that were presented to us by Representative Driscoll honoring Rentschler Farm have been provided to the Historic Society, and I think they'll be on display at Rentschler Farm or the Depot Museum, and we received some copies here at City Hall as well for our records. I would also be remiss, as I was thinking more about that, that recognition, that one person that I think we forgot to acknowledge and thank was former Mayor Rick Coos, who was very instrumental in the city acquiring the farm and preserving it in perpetuity as a living museum. So I want to thank him for all of his efforts in leadership on that front. Are there any other reports or announcements? No? Okay, we move on to the Downtown Alley Work Group. Mr. Campbell, and I believe you're going to be referencing a memorandum dated November the 14th.
Thank you, Mayor. That's correct. As some of you may recall, the city's had a long-term agreement with the folks that owns Dan's Tavern, the alley behind that those folks own, that the city has had an agreement with Dan's to allow the public to traverse back and forth, and there's also some maintenance requirements in that for the city as well. That has since expired, and I'd like to initiate a work group that would potentially consist of 3 or 4 city staff, 2 city council members, and 2 Saline Main Street folks to evaluate that, to see if there's merit in reestablishing that agreement. Also, adjacent to that is Merchants Park, and we currently have a long-term relationship agreement with those folks, and would like to add that, and just because certainly I think they work together, and wanted to have a work group to look at it, study it, and then bring back recommendations to City Council. So, having said that, that's what I would like to do as the city manager, to establish that work group.
Any questions for Mr. Campbell? Just want to elaborate further that when Mr. Campbell approached me with the idea, I thought it was really a fantastic one. And when he offered to include 2 city council members in that work group, I approached Mayor Pro Tem Tahar and Mr. Rhodes, and they graciously agreed to serve on that work group. And so we expect great things, and if there are no objections, we'll proceed with Mr. Campbell establishing that group and reporting back at the appropriate time. Very good. Okay. Last up on the discussion agenda this evening is the sewer reserve. Mr. Burgoyne.
We had a sewer reserve of $1,928,000 established in 1987 as part of a sewer plant construction under a federal grant. I think it's called a 201 grant. So I had asked the question, what was the amount of the investment at that time for which a reserve requirement came up?
Well, your question prompted some very good research, and Terry and I are very well educated. Actually, that $1,928,000 was in the ordinance from 1968. It was not put in with the 1987, but the 1987 project was an $8 million project in which the city issued bonds in the amount of $1,950,000. But the amount for sewer was in the ordinance at the time of revision, and the only thing that was added in 1987 was the water portion, the $100,000 or the $10,000 annually. So Terry and I have been embarking on trying to locate 1968 minutes to see where maybe that $1,928,000 came up with, and I could not. The only thing that I did find was a 1987 memo from the Administrator Loveland at the time, who said that they were going to round up the reserve amount to make sure to address the life of the equipment and to be able to replace that equipment, and that it was going to be, and here's his quote, I liked it, that it was an interim adjustment and that upon the completion of the plant, that value be redetermined. And I do know that as part of our rate study with Tetra Tech, they are going to redetermine those reserve amounts, reevaluate them, and determine what the replacement cost of the equipment would be so that we could rebuild that to have a fund for replacement.
So in 1968, there was a value of how much in the reserve?
The same amount that's in
The
there.
same amount. And when Mr. Levelett said he would change it, but then it didn't get changed.
What the change was so if you look at the reserve in the section of the ordinance, number 408 or whatever that's in the ordinance now, you look at the two revision dates, there's a revision of 1968, section 22-1 under the sewer part, and this ordinance number 408 of 1987. In 1987, what went to staff for review was the original 1960 section 22-1 with that amount already in 1968, with that amount already in it. So the only adjustment made in 1987 was adding the water language. So
do you know, this is probably too far of a cold case.
Well, I don't know. We've dug up some really good stuff this week.
If it was established in 1968 for sewer at 1.928 million, did anyone know in 1968 how much the total value of that investment was that they were basing the 1.9 on?
We found the minute book, which was not anywhere close to the other ones in the 1960s. And we found a yellow sticky where the bond, where we were issuing bonds, but there is no actual formal adoption of the bonds that we can locate at this time to get that amount. Trust me, we've been looking. But it was there in the original 1968, that dollar amount was there. So I think what we probably need to be more concerned on is determining the value of our current equipment and establishing a new reserve amount that would meet today's cost.
Right, but I was thinking if you knew a ratio,
Right.
like 20% or
Well,
25% or.
And that's
you
what I
know,
was thinking too in the 1987 amount. It was an $8 million project, and he moved it up to the 87,000. So maybe it was like 1% or something, but I don't think that would be a good estimate at this point.
Now, if it was established in 1968 and not changed in 87.
Well, but he tweaked the whole project in whole and added the 10,000 to water and sewer the way I'm reading that memo. So there's
Right,
not
but
really.
the sewer didn't change. The
Sewer didn't
part
change at all,
didn't change.
no. And the project, the $8 million was a sewer project. So I don't know what the grounds were. We looked, and I do know that we are going to be reevaluating it, and so that number I'm sure will change significantly with this study we're performing right now.
In your asset inventory, do you have any way of knowing approximately how much sewer assets in total you had in 1968? No, too much. Huh?
I was a year old in 1968. I've been digging back to stuff, but I mean, that's a good place to look, and I'm not quite ready to call it done yet, because now I feel like a detective and cracking a cold case. So we are continuing to kind of look at that, but that's the history that Terry helped me with, and that's the information we were able to get.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Any additional discussion items? Mr. Gearbaugh? Ms. Bennett?
Not for Ms. Bennett, but
no?
just,
Okay.
just a question basically for council. Why did we spend time looking at an issue that's 45 years old, and we already have plans to have this stuff assessed, wasting staff's time an entire week when we're trying to cut, when we've cut and continued to cut, and yet we're looking at these items that are being addressed proactively instead of going back and looking at something from 15 years ago in terms of the rec center and 45 years ago in terms of the sewer system. Because I am fed up with having to have all these issues brought back, and yet the added value of these is not there. I want to see that we don't continue to have this kind of goose chase called a cold case in the future. I don't know where this is or why this is happening, but at this point, I believe our city manager has the authority and should be proactively looking at what is scheduled for our staff, and it is his authority to make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaum. Certainly don't disagree. Are there any other discussion items this evening? No? Okay. Then we move on to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period, will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary LaRonas, 373 West Bennett. I'm handing out the newsletter, and I apologize for the lateness of getting it to you. A lot of the dates in there have gone by already, but there's still a lot of good information in there about the new leadership, the new executive council, the Adopt a Stream program, and some of the programs that are also going on in the partnership with the Legacy Land Conservancy. So there's a lot of good information in there, and if you want to be an individual member, as I plan to continue to be, the address where you send your check is on the back page. I have served as the River Raisin Watershed Council representative for 10+ years and will be stepping down from that position at the end of this year. It requires considerable driving, as most of the meetings are in Adrian. I try to avoid nighttime and bad weather driving, so that cuts out a lot of the meetings. I've sincerely enjoyed the job, and it has been a wonderful learning experience, and I will continue to be an individual member and will attend what meetings I can. I want to thank the city for giving me this opportunity, and I will get a letter of resignation to you. I think it's probably time for someone else to take it over anyway. I would also like to take just a couple minutes to respond to the fracking, even if I go over my 3 minutes. I would like to take just a moment to respond to the sale of water for fracking. Some things are more important than money, and water is one of them. The amount of water we have is finite. There's no new water being made. The fracking process, as I understand it, contaminates the huge amount of water they use so badly it cannot be cleaned and therefore is put in deep injection wells. I'm sure future generations will question our sanity if we allow drinkable water to be destroyed for money. So money is not the issue. Water is the issue, and we have to protect our drinkable water because nobody is making any new water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and we appreciate you being here this evening to share this information, and more importantly, we appreciate and value your years of service and distinction as a member of the River Raisin Watershed Council. It is, it's a tongue twister, but we appreciate it. Thank you for the report. Are there any other citizen comments? No? I want to make one last point before I talk about upcoming meetings. To Mr. Gearbaugh's last comment, I did just share a few words with Mr. Campbell, and there is, I think, agreement between he and I that when council members ask questions or make demands of staff members that go beyond the normal scope of questions and inquiries that they receive, that they will be forwarded to this council to see if there's a majority consensus to move forward. And if it's determined that there's a majority of council who wants a particular piece of information or analysis done, it will be done. But those extra burdens will not be done simply because one or two council members request them. So thank you for that, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? No, then our next meetings for December are on the 2nd at 7:30 and on the 16th at 7:30. We will not be having work meetings. And I want to wish everyone at the dais and in the audience this evening a happy Thanksgiving next Thursday. There are no absences this evening, so we'll dispense with that. And I would seek a motion to adjourn at 9:20 p.m.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Gearbaugh to adjourn at 9:20. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed say nay. This meeting's adjourned.